This episode, we are taking a trip back to the heyday of horror, and we're going to be talking about a 1982 movie, which in preparation for this episode, I watched three different versions of this movie. I watched the original from way back in the 50s, and then I watched the 1982 version, and then I watched the 2011 version of the movie, which is actually not a reboot or a sequel, but a prequel to the 1982 movie. And we're talking about John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, this was one of those movies that back in the day, you know, that era when you and I were, you know, first grabbing onto these films. This one, I remember, was a big deal on cable, was a big deal as a rental. I don't know about you, though, but back then it never really stuck with me. I remember the scene, you know, the gore scene with the, when, you know, the thing detaches its head and like grows legs and all that stuff, and that being like a really big deal, seeing that because the special effects were so cool. This movie wasn't like a movie that I watched over and over and over again back in the day, like a lot of the movies we talk about here. And I think like I kind of follow into the lines of most people when it comes to this movie, where during its time, its heyday, when it was first released, it kind of got panned over. And then it wasn't until way, way, way later that people started to rediscover it and go, wait, that movie was pretty good.
I don't remember the first time I saw this movie. I do remember something when I was fairly young, and my grandparents had this farm out in the middle of the country in the mid-'80s before it was... Well, I guess this was kind of along the same lines when it was really starting to be popular, because I had a TV in my bedroom at the same time, and so did my parents. But anyway, my grandparents lived out in this farm out in the middle of nowhere, and they had a TV in every room of their house, which seems like a lot, but they did. They had a TV in every room in their house, and they had this one room that was like, it was a bedroom, but I don't remember why, but we always used to play in it when we were kids. I don't know if it was a commercial for like The Thing coming on TV, or if it was The Thing was playing on TV, or if it was the original The Thing from Outer Space or from Another World was playing. But I do remember like The Thing on this TV. Man, I couldn't even tell you the first time I saw it after that.
Yeah, I just remember it being, we rented it a few times. My dad kind of liked it, I think. And it never really like was one that I watched a whole bunch, but like I remember all the special effects stuff, just, you know, being a kid, being fascinated by that.
The one thing I will say about the special effects in this movie is that I would almost, and I'm not quite ready to commit to this statement quite yet, but I'm pretty close. But after watching this, the special effects in this, I would almost say rival Tom Savini.
I think you might be right. I would agree. And there's some really good effects in this movie. I mean, very creative effects too. Who is the guy? It was this Stan Winston, right?
Most of the special effects were designed and created by Rob Bottin.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, he did.
With the exception of the dog creature, which was Stan Winston.
Ah, okay. What else did Bottin do? He did some other things too. He was like one of the werewolf movies, wasn't he?
He did The Howling.
The Howling, that's right. Okay.
It's kind of funny, too, because this episode I've actually done a ton of preparation for, inadvertently. So I watched the original 1950s movie, which actually is not a very good movie at all.
Was it entertaining?
No, it's kind of like a bad Svengoolie movie, you know? I mean, it really wasn't that good at all. But then I watched the original, or not the original, but the 1982 version. And then I watched a documentary that I found on YouTube about the making of the 1982 one, which was probably from, I'm assuming it was probably from the 90s, because like Kurt Russell looked pretty young in it compared to what he looks like now. And I mean, John Carpenter looked like an old man, but John Carpenter's looked like an old man pretty much forever. Then I watched the original again, and then I watched the 2011 version. And I gotta say that of all of them, you know, like the original 1950s version is the worst out of the bunch. The 2011 version is actually, I think, a pretty good movie. But the making of documentary was kind of entertaining as well. I mean, it basically was all the actors talking about, you know, reminiscing about shooting this movie, well, probably 15 years before they shot it, the documentary. But
oh, okay.
I think I read the short story that inspired the original movie at one point, and I guess I didn't realize when they had decided to make this movie, when Carpenter said he wanted to make this movie after the success of Escape from New York, that he got the okay from the studio to make it, rather than it be a remake. They went back and they decided to go ahead and kind of what we were talking about in the last episode with these reboots and stuff, you know, to kind of reboot it more than an actual remake. That movie is actually based off of the short story more than it is the original movie, hence why a lot of it is so much different than the original. A couple of things I did learn from the documentary that I didn't know before. One is that dog that is in the first part of the movie, Jed, that he was actually like a half-breed. He was actually part wolf, part dog, which rather than just being like a husky. Which I
think I read something about that. Yeah.
But then the other part, which I thought was kind of interesting more than anything, I could still see them doing to this day, is that all the interior shots were just shot at the Universal lot in Hollywood, but they were shot in the summertime, and a lot of them, it was like 100 and some degrees outside, and they were on these sets that they were refrigerating. So,
oh, really?
You know, you could see their breath and stuff. But I guess that because of this, a lot of the crew got like really sick because they would be in the studio filming these shots on these sets that were like, 35, 40 degrees. And then they would go out in the scorching heat and then come back in and then, shoot the rest of the day or whatever. But I guess a lot of the guys were like, yeah, after a couple of weeks of doing that, we all just would wear our parkas everywhere. We didn't care.
Yeah, this was the first Carpenter movie too, I believe, that kind of he stepped out into the big studio environment. Prior to this one, it was all kind of more his own little thing going on with his own little crew. With the like you think of Halloween, The Fog, Escape, all those early films, and then this one was like the first one where they said, okay, the studios are back and here's some more money, and even this one, which is kind of interesting, which I didn't realize until a few years ago, was that the score, the soundtrack, this isn't Carpenter. That theme that that really, I mean, it's very simple one note theme that you think of when you think of this movie. That wasn't Carpenter's theme. Somebody else put that together. And another thing too about this movie that I found interesting, and I've heard in a few interviews with Carpenter, was this was the movie that was going to make or break him. This was his like, okay, I'm going to go out into the bigger success with this one, or it's going to take me the opposite direction. And at its time, when this first was released in 1982, when it was released, it actually flopped. It didn't do well commercially, and it was competing against like E.T., which was like sort of more the happy, positive alien movie of the year. And it actually kind of hurt him. Like, it hurt his career, because at this point, the studios really kind of didn't offer him projects anymore. And then he went on after this to go back to the horror genre and do Christine, which he didn't really want to do. He just needed a paycheck. So this movie was like the one that, because it didn't do well in its time, actually kind of hurt him. And if you look at it too, it's kind of was like I guess, They Live came later on, but none of his movies really had a huge amount of commercial success after this one.
Christine wasn't a horrible movie by any stretch of the imagination, but then Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, Big Trouble, that's right.
But then after those, but I don't think that Big Trouble in Little China or They Live, either of those were really successful movies when they first came out. I know that they all definitely have a huge cult following now, but I don't know if he really made any real successful movies
outside of Halloween.
Yeah,
I think Halloween was his. That one keeps going on and on and on. Sequels, and I mean, that's obviously remakes and reboots and all that. Yeah, it was like pretty much everything he did. Like afterwards, I mean, it didn't do big numbers at all. Very kind of low level films. Later stuff like Vampires, Ghosts of Mars. I mean, yeah, none of that stuff really was commercially that successful.
Vampires is a good movie, though. We got to do that once at some point. That's a good movie.
It's been a long time since I've seen that.
Oh, it's so good.
I was going to ask you this. A lot of Carpenter fans, usually when you ask, what's your favorite John Carpenter movie? It's either going to be The Thing or Halloween. And to me, it really is no question that it's Halloween. That's my favorite horror movie of all time. And I enjoy The Thing, and I think it's a good movie, and I definitely recommend it. But to me, it doesn't really hold a candle compared to Halloween. I think Halloween was a far more creative film. I mean, just in terms of everything, like the memorable score, the story, all of it. To me, that one really sticks out as his best achievement.
But I also, at the same time, though, even though The Thing, I wouldn't consider it a favorite of mine by any stretch of the imagination, it's a pretty good movie overall. And when you go back and you think of that it's from 1982, as I was saying before with some of the special effects and stuff, when you see those now, it's like, oh, how did they do that? That's insane. Especially when you, like I said before, I watched the 2011 version. While a lot of the stuff in the 2011 version is practical effects, a lot of it is CGI'd. And so when you see that CGI'd shit compared to, some of the stuff in, like you had said, you had the scene where, the whole scene on the table where they're trying to revive the one guy, and his chest bursts open, bites off the arms of the other guy, and then his head rips off and falls down, and then his tongue lashes out and like pulls his head across the floor, and then he grows legs and eyeballs or something. He had something, antenna or something coming out of the top of his head, and crawls around and stuff. Like a lot of that stuff, you're like, how did they do that? And I know how they did a lot of it. A lot of it's practical effects. Actually, from watching that documentary, one of the things I did learn, which I did not know before, is that exact scene when the chest bursts open and it chops the guy's arms off, they actually hired a guy who didn't have both of his arms, like an amputee. And they made essentially a replica mask of the guy's face, and glued it to his face, and then they glued these like jello arms onto his arm stubs. And so there's a part of that scene where the guy's like flailing around with his stubs, all bloody and stuff, that's a completely different actor. Like, that's how they did it back then. Yeah, it's an amputee. I'm like,
wow,
that's
interesting.
Cool.
Holy cow, I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff you're like, what?
That's crazy. That was on the extras or something?
No. If you go onto YouTube and there's a making of documentary out there.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
And like I said, it's from like...
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's got to be from like 1995 or something, because Kurt Russell like doesn't have any wrinkles and he's got like a full head of brown hair. Overall, I really think that the movie is good. It still holds together. It's still entertaining when I watch it now.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's definitely quality work, and I could see why people went back to this one all these years later, and we're all talking about it still. It's definitely a cult classic. It deserved more than it got when it first came out, and you got to check this one out for sure.
Yeah, I was saying to you yesterday that we had to get some J&B whiskey for the recording of the show. Actually, what we should have gotten for the recording of this episode is we should have gotten some of those giant 10-gallon hats that McCready wears during the first part of the movie and wore those while we're recording. That would have been great.
There you go.
Basically, the synopsis behind this one is this research camp in the Antarctic. These Norwegians fly in trying to attack this dog, and one Norwegian inadvertently blows up himself, and then the other Norwegian gets shot in the eyeball by the commander. Guys at the camp are trying to figure out what the hell these Norwegians are up to, so they go and they travel to the Norwegian camp, which is, I don't know, an hour away, I guess is what they said.
Was it really that far away?
Well, I remember one of the guys saying, like, oh, it's an hour there, an hour back, no problem.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. They
come back, lo and behold, the thing starts to attack the camp, and then pretty much from there on out, it's a bloodbath. There's a lot of gore, and there's a lot of drinking, and the other thing that I noticed, which I don't think I really paid too much attention to before, but there's a lot of pot smoking going on in this movie.
And this we say horror movie, but this was also kind of a science fiction film too. Yeah,
it's, to a certain aspect, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like it goes along the lines of Alien and Aliens, really. It's right on that borderline of horror and science fiction. If this one didn't have as much gore in it as it did, it probably would have been more of a science fiction movie. And there's a lot of gore in it, for sure. And there's a lot of cool gore. I mean, I don't want to say the monster in this movie, because it has so many different forms. So I'll say the monsters in this movie, but they are cool.
It's kind of funny because this came out in 1982. And Carpenter a lot of times says that this movie was before its time and that there was just too much gore for people to stomach. But only 4 years later, Aliens came out, the sequel to Alien, which to me, kind of along the same lines in terms of science fiction, alien/gore type stuff. That movie was a huge hit, box office wise. So I guess, in just 4 years, a lot changed.
One of the main premises of this movie is that the Thing is this alien who's as they commonly refer to him in the movie, an imitator. So if it gets in this one, they didn't go into as much of it as they did in the 2011 version, to where in that one they said, if it gets a hold of one cell, then it can replicate you. But I mean, they were kind of going along the same lines in that one, so that was a big part of the movie. If anybody was alone with the Thing for any amount of time, then you didn't know who was human and who wasn't human.
Yeah,
they were trying to say, one of the things that they had said in this one is if your clothes were torn up at all, then you were probably inhabited by the Thing. But one of the things that I was reading and actually watched a couple of YouTube videos on this, kind of jumping towards the end of this, but at the end of the movie, there are two individuals left. And I want to get your opinion on this to see if you have any thoughts on this. So of the two individuals that are left at the end of the movie, when they're sitting there after the camp's all burning up and stuff, did you ever think in your mind that one of those two people was actually the Thing?
No, I never did.
See, neither did I.
I thought it was just that was it. Because, with the whole, everything that they went through and all that, and the monster and all that, I just kind of took it for, oh, that's the end.
Supposedly there's this huge fan theory going around that one of them, mainly Childs, is the Thing. Which,
really?
Yeah, but I don't know what good that would do you anyway, because even if he killed McCready, I mean, what's he going to do? He's not going to go anywhere. He's going to sit there and freeze to death.
If that's true. But no,
yeah,
I never knew that. I never read about that.
Yeah, it's just one of the things when I was getting ready for this episode, I come across it. And, fan theory that the Thing should have been a sequel because he survived. I'm like, what? And even watching that documentary that I was watching the other day, they even referred to it at the end when the two guys were left for dead. That's actually why I watched it twice, getting ready for this one, because I had originally watched it, a couple weeks ago, and then I heard that, and I was like, what?
Gotta watch it again.
So then I watched it again with that in mind, and the same thing got to the end, and I was like, nah, it's a bunch of crap. But
okay.
That 2011 version, I mean, that's... If you're going to be making reboots and in all of these things to the movies, you should do it in that kind of fashion to where... I mean, in the 2011 one, even though it kind of seemed like it had a different storyline going into it than the 1982 version had, and it does have a little bit of a remake feel to it in certain scenes, to where there's some of the stuff that has the same elements that the 1982 version had, which goes back to what you were talking about in the last episode about how you would like to do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel, but it would have some of those same elements as the original.
Yes.
So I thought that the 2011 version did a really nice job with a lot of that. And there's a couple of things that are in that one that make it into this one. For example, the two-headed monster that they find burned in the snow outside of the Norwegian camp, that makes the appearance in this one. But then the other really kind of cool thing that makes its appearance in the 2011 one is because the main character of that one is a female character, and there were no females in the 1982 version of the movie. Not even a female body.
That's true.
But they explained that as well in the 2011 one. And then, it kind of ends, kind of like what Rogue One did, it ends with the scene that started the next movie. So, all of that was pretty cool.
It was, yeah, I haven't seen that prequel in a long time, but I do remember thinking it was pretty good when I saw it.
One of the things I was thinking of when I was watching this is that while they did make a few movies together, Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, I always think in the back of my mind that it would be cool if John Carpenter would have made a horror movie with Kurt Russell as the monster or the bad guy, rather than always being the hero.
Yeah, that would have been kind of cool.
Who knows? Maybe he'll be the Shape in the new Halloween movie.
Well, Michael Myers would be old enough to be Kurt Russell, I guess, so probably work. Yeah, that's another problem with that whole remake is I wonder, they can't have like a senior citizen Michael Myers running around, so they're going to probably have to base it in the 80s or something.
But yeah, Kurt Russell always played the I almost said good guy there, but that's not actually accurate at all, because I don't think he actually played a good guy in any of the movies, but he was always the hero of the movie.
That's true. And he played Elvis once for John Carpenter, too, for the TV film Elvis.
Oh, that's right. I completely forgot about that. I keep meaning to watch that, but I can't ever find it anywhere.
Yeah, I've never seen it. That was right after Halloween he'd start doing that.
Yeah, because that's why he played Snake in Escape from New York was from that. And then the other thing that I heard about the McCready character in this one was they were like getting ready to shoot the movie. Carpenter kind of asked Kurt Russell if he wanted to play this character, and he's like, sure. And then I guess they kind of rewrote the character so Kurt Russell would be more of a star in the movie rather than just be one of the guys in the background.
Oh, that's cool.
There's a lot of the stuff, even the opening sequence when you have the flying saucer orbiting the Earth and then it crashes down. When you think of that as being a practical effect, like a lot of the Star Wars effects were in those early movies, but still it's like, whoa, so all that was like a PVC flying saucer and you did that? That's awesome.
Yeah, they do a really, really good job with the effects in this film, by far. Really good. And they are more enjoyable, from what I recall, than the prequel.
Yeah, like I said, when I watched the prequel, I just noticed a lot of the transformation scenes with the Thing were CGI'd more than anything.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And they still haven't got the CGI stuff quite right yet, even though I know that a lot of people are like, oh, you should watch Avatar. And I've seen bits and pieces of Avatar.
Yeah, don't waste your time.
Yeah, it still kind of looks cartoonish or a lot of blue screen stuff to me. So when you actually get it to where it looks real, then I'll be like, oh, cool. Because, we already talked about it, but the scene where the guy is on the table and they are shocking him and then his chest bursts open. I mean, that's all practical effects. That's not computer generated at all. You can't really tell where the guy's... I mean, that's his real head there. So you can't really tell where his head starts and stops and the prosthetic stops and starts. I mean,
oh, yeah.
They used to do all this stuff back in the day with, they would have these giant rubber appliances that they would use and they would paint them and all this other stuff. But then they would do stuff with the lighting and the camera angles and stuff. So you didn't see like the really fakey, rubbery sheen off of the appliance, and you didn't see, you couldn't really tell it was painted at all, and you didn't see any seams or any creases or anything like that. So, but they don't really do that anymore. I mean, they kind of do that with some of the stuff, but not nearly as much as they used to. Even, The Force Awakens that came out a couple years ago, and they were like, oh, it's all practical effects. And then you actually start doing some looking at the making of and stuff, and then you realize, oh, it's kind of practical effects, but then it's also computer animated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is way before that stuff. But yeah. Yeah, this is, totally in-your-face practical effects before the computer technology really took off. So you're really seeing some pretty cool stuff in the designs that they came up with and the way they got those monsters to move. I mean, it's pretty exciting. And there's something about it, too. It's more interesting to me to see that on the screen than it is to watch, like, animation. Well,
and one of the things, too, that with how a lot of this stuff was done, in the late 70s, early 80s, and you had all of these guys that were these horror special effects artists. A lot of this stuff wasn't done before. You go back and you watch interviews of Tom Savini from the Friday the 13th movie, or the guys from this movie, or The Howling, or some of these other movies, and they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. It looks great on paper. And then, and then you hear these stories of the director coming out and saying, oh, so you know how to do that? We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty amazing how they did figure out a lot of this stuff, though, I mean, to come up with, like, how do you make this, like, a living creatures, but, without, this is, pre-computer days, and how do you make this happen and that happen? And they really did the best they could, and I think it, a lot of ways, turned out better than some of the stuff nowadays. Yeah, because like nowadays, like the computer generated stuff is cool, some of it is, but it also has that look to it that just where it's animated and it's kind of like you're watching a video game, and I think that always pulls me out. Like it's funny because like I'll watch an old horror movie, and you'll know when like a special effect is that it's going into special effect territory. It's not real, but it's somehow more interesting to look at than when you're watching something that's like computer where it's it's animated, as opposed to like it's being really really there. Like an example, I just watched recently that movie The Mutilator that you and I talked about. The movie's terrible. The special effects are all practical, and although they're a little over the top, they're more interesting to watch than if you're to watch like I don't know, like CGI versions of that type of violence.
The other thing, too, with a lot of these special effects is a lot of times it's, you get up to a certain point and then like, all right, wrap, let's take a break or go to lunch or, whatever.
Yeah.
To whereas you listen to some of these behind-the-scenes interviews, whether it's, this movie or The Howling or, American Werewolf in London or whatever it is, and you listen to these guys talk about like, oh, yeah, so we set up for that shot for 12 hours, and then the latex ripped right after he said action, so then we had to reset up for 12 hours, and then we finally got it on the third take.
Right.
Or you listen to some of these the actors talk about it and be like, oh, yeah, I was in this position for 14 hours doing that one shot that was 30 seconds in the movie. Talk about some of this other stuff for all the special effects that's all computer animated and stuff. And these, it's no big deal because like, oh yeah, we did this shot on a blue screen and
yeah, right, exactly.
They did it all post production. I didn't even. When I saw it in a theater, I was like, whoa, that looks cool. I had no idea what it was going to look like.
This is one of those classic 80s horror movies that if you haven't seen it, you got to go see it. But again, you probably have seen it if you're on this podcast, because the thing is, it's a classic.
I will say that the one time that I did see this in the movie theater was 4 years ago. My first flashback weekend experience for the 30th anniversary of this movie. So they screened it at the movie theater that's right by the convention center there. And it was introduced by the man himself, John Carpenter. So I got to watch it on the big screen. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. You can't really ask any more than, an evening out than having the Thing introduced by John Carpenter on a big screen.
Well, I've told this story before. I think I've told it before on the air. But this was the same night that I think I saw 3 movies that night. 3 or 4 movies that night. But I think The Thing was the first, probably because John Carpenter, he's 98 years old. He had to get home and get to bed. But Among Friends was making its debut at the convention that year too, which is Danielle Harris's directorial debut. And she introduced her movie, and then she sat down right next to me and watched the movie with me. That's how I tell it anyway. I always say, yeah, I watched it with Danielle Harris. She had no idea I was sitting next to her, but...
That's still pretty darn cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then, I saw... I can't remember if that was the same night or not, but it was... Because that was one of the years that they were renting out that Movie Co. theater that's like across the parking lot or parking structure from the hotel.
Yeah.
And like the Friday night, there was like 3 movies and a couple short movies playing. And then Saturday night, there was like 3 or 4 movies playing. And I had access to all of them.
That is too cool.
So I went and saw all of them. All
Very
the ones,
cool.
Not all of them, but I went and saw a bunch of them. So it was pretty cool. So, and we'll be making our, I guess, 3rd annual appearance at Flashback Weekend this year.
Yes, we will.
August, which is shaping up to be kind of a cool convention this year. It seems to be and they haven't made any official announcements yet, but it seems to be that it's going to be Nightmare on Elm Street themed more than anything, which I am completely on board with them doing this, which they have been doing lately. Is because I was at one that was really Friday the 13th themed. We went to one, I went to one that was really heavily Halloween themed, and then we went to one that was really. Did we go to one that was really Friday the 13th themed, or did we go to the one that was Halloween themed?
No, it was Halloween themed, and then that was and then Friday the 13th. Well, they had the Final Girls last year. But the first one was all the Michael Myers. Yeah, I think pretty much every Michael Myers was there except for Tyler Mane.
Yeah, and he was at the original, the first one that I went to, which one was more Friday the 13th themed because all the Jasons were there.
Yeah, come to think about it, yeah, every single Michael Myers, including the kids, or the original Michael Myers when he was a kid in both the original and the flashback scene in Part 4, they were all there except for Halloween Resurrections. Michael Myers wasn't there, and the kid from Zombies Halloween movies and and Tyler Mane. So, like, I'd say 90% of all the Michael Myers actors were at that convention.
Well, that dude from Resurrection can go right to hell.
Yeah, he wasn't there. He knew better.
Poor guy would have got his ass beat in a parking lot.
Yeah, no kidding. That's where I met Nick Castle and Dick Warlock. But George Wilbur was there. Don Shanks was there. Chris Durant from Seven was there. So yeah, they were all there except for and then the kid, I forget the guy's name who played Michael Myers when he was a kid. Yeah, they were all there. It was pretty cool.
Cool. The Thing, you give that a thumbs up?
Oh yeah, I got to give this one a thumbs up.
It's really one of those movies. I don't remember when I started watching it. I don't actually even think I own a physical copy of this movie, but it's just one of those ones that, you throw it on and it's enjoyable. It's a good movie. I mean,
yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, it's not his best by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a good movie. I mean, of the John Carpenter movies, I would say it's got to be number 2.
Yeah, it's pretty high up there for sure. I have kind of a guilty pleasure with The Fog, where I tend to watch that one. But again, looking at comparing The Fog with The Thing, I'd have to probably say The Thing is the better film. If you haven't seen it, you can get it on Amazon, of course, or if you want a physical copy, if you're like me and you like to collect this stuff, I would recommend going and purchasing the Blu-ray from Shout Factory, because boy, do they do a real good job with these films.
All right, guys, so there you have it. And then we'll be back. Well, I might go ahead and say we'll be back next week with something that we like, because we got to take a break from doing the shit that we hate, because those are just painful episodes to record.
Yeah, we'll come up with something good.
We're going to do a tribute episode to Jamie Lee Curtis in her underwear.
There you go.